Hey guys, how you doing? Happy New Year. This is Andrew Sims with the Sims Consulting Group. And today we're going to talk about the basic indicators of the U.S. economy and why it matters to us as business owners and consumers, right? I think it's important coming up on the midterms, right? As a consumer, as a business owner, as a person that has to go out and deal with this economy, right? Navigate this economy, invest in this economy, decide whether to expand the organization or to keep it the way it is or to reduce staffing, right? All of these things, right, are affected by the indicators, the economic indicators, how it relates to us as consumers, how it relates to us as business owners, right? I'm going to kind of break down my top indicators and what I look at specifically, right? And then I'm going to also kind of highlight whether it's a lagging indicator or whether it's one of those upfront indicators that we get to see results or the estimates from a little quicker, right? Because they'll kind of tell us where things are going as opposed to being a lagging indicator where you're going to put something in place and then the results are going to follow, right? For instance, let's say any particular politician writes an economic policy and they put that policy in place. Well, they're going to give you estimates of what they think this is going to do based on trends, research, all this thing, right? But we don't know if it actually produced the results that they said it was going to produce until after it's been into effect for a certain period of time, right? That's what you call a lagging indicator. And the first one that we're going to talk about is probably the biggest one that you've probably heard the most about, which is the GDP or the gross domestic product. That is a lagging indicator, meaning there's going to be something that happens on the front end, some kind of policy that's put in place, right? Or some kind of whatever they're going to put in place, it's going to take effect, and you're going to have to give it time before you see it actually quote unquote produce the results or not produce the results. So here's the definition, right? It represents economic production and growth, or the size of the economy. Well, I'm sorry, read it again. It represents economic production and growth or the size of the economy. There are two ways of measurement: the income approach and the expenditure approach, right? Basically, that means what is earned versus what is spent, right? The income approach means how much we're bringing in as a country, right? That's the income approach. How are we doing as far as bringing in money into the country? And then the expenditure, what are we kicking out as a country, right? The gross domestic product is really telling you the size of the economy. That's important, right? Because we need to know whether our economy is doing well from a GDP standpoint or whether it's not doing well from a GDP standpoint. And that's going to tell us the size of our economy, right? If the economy is growing and it's truly growing, not like a bubble, not of these different things, we're going to be able to forecast better results for our business because there's basically more money in circulation, right? That's a bigger economy. The second indicator, the stock market. It's leading, but trust me, it's less accurate, right? Because the stock market, we all understand what the stock market is, but the stock market can be manipulated. Always keep in mind when you're looking at the stock market for an indicator of how well a particular company is doing, right? Or how well stocks are doing in a particular market, right? Understand that they can be manipulated. There's all kinds of insider trading, all kinds of things that can be done. There's bubbles. Think 2008 when you think of the stock market bubble, right? Where there it looks like it's doing really well, but it's false money, right? It's not really producing or growing at the rate that they say it is. It's being manipulated. It's something that indicates a future result to us, but it's much less accurate because it can't be manipulated. But you want to watch the stock market because hopefully you got some money on the stock market. And if you don't, then you want to watch the stock market to understand it better. So when you do get some money, you'll decide how to invest in the stock market, whether you want to be a day trader or whether you want to go through some particular company or kind of pick funds and things like that. The third one, which is very important, and specifically for the business, right, is unemployment. Unemployment is a lagging indicator, right? Because generally, most presidential candidates or politicians or whoever run on the ability to employ Americans, right? Why is that so important? Because employed Americans spend money, employed Americans pay bills, employed Americans buy things, employed Americans go to work every day, right? It shows you how healthy your economy is, but it's lagging because, again, let's say they put, and remember they were doing the policy that was going to the infrastructure policy that was going to produce X amount of jobs, right? When you put that policy in place, everybody's not hired that day. right? So it takes time to fill those positions so those people can now, start bringing in income. And then that income can, kind of stabilize where they're at in their lives. But then after it stabilizes them, we want that money as a country to start circulating, right? That's why unemployment is very important, because unemployed people don't spend money, right? And America's a consumer country where we consume everything, right? But if there's no money for consumption, we're in a bad situation. So as business owners, specifically if you are dealing with consumer, business to consumer type of relations, or you're really relying on excess income to be able to really, to really be able to sell your product, whether it's clothes, cars, right? All of those income statistics really make a difference, specifically in your area, because it lets you know whether you have a healthy economy to keep growing or thriving or growing, right? So unemployment lagging, but remember it's lagging. Consumer price index is a lagging indicator. Now I'll read you the definition I wrote. And it measures the cost of living changes, right? It takes about a sampling of several hundred goods and services across 200 categories. It's one of the best indicators of inflation. The cost of living, right, is something that we have never kept up with as a society, right? Because again, the cost of living jumps a lot faster than the average income. But for the country to be successful, there has to be some sort of favorable ratio. And I know you hear the word favorable and you think, well, how could it be favorable if the cost of living is always higher than the lowest income, right? Or than most of incomes, right? Than most of the incomes in that area. What I mean by that is the ratio still has to allow for people to have income that they can spend. Because if income's not circulating, there's going to be a problem, right? You're going to start seeing layoffs, which is going to affect unemployment, which is going to affect the economy and all these things like that. So there has to be a favorable ratio, maybe not favorable to the everyday person that's living in a place, right? Making minimum wage, living in New York, right? That's not favorable, right? But it has to have some sort of a connection. They have to be tied together, because if you don't have them tied together, again, the money's not circulating, and we need the money to circulate as an economy. All economies need money to circulate, but specifically we're talking about America. So we have to keep our eye on the consumer price index, which is a lagging indicator. Now, on the other side of that, you have the producer price index, right? What does it cost to actually make the goods that we're selling, right? And this tracks the price changes in almost all almost all goods producing services. It captures price movements on a wholesale level before price changes show up on a retail level. Why is this important? If something costs $20 to produce, right? If it costs, to produce one tire, it costs $20. And then all of a sudden something happens with rubber, right? Or we can't get the other materials we need to produce tires. And they become, more rare, so they become more expensive. So down that $20 tire, because of these incidents and things like that, now becomes a $25 tire. That's going to affect the car industry, right? Which is a big portion of our economy. And it's going to limit the amount of money in circulation. So we have to keep an eye on what it's costing to produce major goods, right? And it says all goods, but that's a tall order. I'm pretty sure they're taking sample sizes of different sections that are really producing or building or driving the economy, right? And they're saying, hey, how much is it costing on a wholesale level? Because before it hits the retailer, we want to be able to see, maybe we can provide tax subsidies or things like that to be able to really offset some of the costs that go to the consumer, or at least be aware of the swings of that pendulum, so we can better prepare as a business, as a country, as far as how much it's going to cost to produce the goods that we use every day. The next is the balance of trade, which is another lagging indicator, right? The PPI, the price producing index, is not lagging, because we see that on the front end. Because before you make a good, you have to buy the stuff you're going to need to make it. So it's an early indicator, right? And it really shows us where we're going as far as specifically the cost of living, right? So it's something that we're able to see on the front end, which gives us kind of an insight onto where we're going as an economy. So again, the balance of trade, a lagging indicator, and it's the net difference between a country's value of imports versus exports, and it shows whether there is a trade surplus or a trade deficit. Trade deficits can lead to domestic debt. Why did I bring this into it? Because we are we owe as a country, we owe people some money, um, and we have to keep that in the forefront because that is debt for future generations. And that means that as we kind of operate in a trade deficit in certain areas, right? It's going to cost us more on those loans and it's going to be longer. And we're going to have to kind of think about as a country how we're going to quote unquote balance the books because those things affect future generations, right? And we want to leave a better country to our children than we have at this present point in time. So when you hear these different politicians and things like that talk about debt, it is an important indicator, right? This is something that we need to look at, but also figure out how they're trying to solve the problem because in many cases, it's not that one particular group is trying to remove the debt. They just figure that the money needs to be spent that we're going to use or be in debt for in different areas. So again, it's important to us because we want to be able to make sure that we're in a balanced trade surplus, not deficit. Now, and then again, we always have exports. We import in a lot of stuff in this country. We don't really produce as much as we used to. So we got to look at the cost to import things into this country, right? So that's another story for another day. And then we have housing starts. The house starts are an estimate of the number of housing units on which construction was performed, right? The housing market, that's a big part of the U.S. economy. We want to keep our eyes on it, specifically on a local level. Nationally is okay, but on a local level, you want to know how your city's housing market is doing because that means people are buying homes, they're putting down roots, right? So your business has a group of consumers in reach. It's not a transient area, right? It also lets you know that there's money out there, which is going to lead into my next point. It means there's probably better interest rates out there, and that's the cost of borrowing money. That's another indicator. The cost of borrowing money can tell you one or two things, right? Either the economy is doing bad and they're trying to stimulate it, or the economy is doing well and they want to drive it home. So you want to look at that and make sure you understand what interest rates are doing. And last but not least, my favorite, consumer spending speaks for itself, right? We want to know how consumer spending is doing because just because a family has the surplus funds to spend doesn't mean they're going to spend them. And in America, that hasn't been too much of a problem. We can see by the average household debt. But we want to keep that in mind because consumer spending means a lot to us as business. Not specifically. I'm a business to business consultant, so generally I'm looking at stock markets, things like that, right? But at the end of the day, in stock markets, in a way, is this a strong business? I'm going to invest in it. Is this a strong business? Are we going to tie together, right? And things like that. But at the same time, consumer spending is if you're a business to consumer, you're selling T-shirts, perfume, iPhones, whatever, right? You want to know how consumer spending is doing because that lets you know whether there's consumers out there spending money, which are then going to turn buy your product, right? Last but not least, man, I as a believer, we got to bring it back home, right? Check with your again, all these indicators may say one thing, but lean in on your spirit, pray, seek God on some of these things that you're going to do as an organization. Make sure you're being led by God as you move forward as an organization, even with the indicators. Remember, data is just one part of the equation for a believer. You get your data, you understand it, because you're supposed to be informed, but then take that information and go to God. So once again, this is Andrew Sims with the Sims Consulting Group. Y'all be blessed, man. Happy New Year. Peace.